Welcome to Soul Elevation, guiding your ascension to new heights. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and I hope you're ready to enjoy this fascinating episode with Gaur, founder of PortalToAscension. We get into some profound topics like the critical importance of the shadow, which if you've heard other content from me in 2025 in particular, you'll know this is a prominent theme of the year. We talk about star races such as Lyrans and Sirians. We get into the role of snakes and dragons in humanity's history, and Neil shares insights from his many lives in Orion, and so much more. You're going to be stretched into new levels of understanding in this episode, so buckle up. Gaur is the founder of PortalToAscension, a conscious event production company hosting global gatherings and online conferences on topics like human origins, extraterrestrial life, hidden truths, and the nature of reality. Since 2008, he's worked with over 1,500 experts, facilitating around 110 events annually. A philosopher, historian, researcher, and spoken word artist, Neil explores ancient civilizations, sound and frequency, esoteric wisdom, and pathways to unity and peace on Earth. So we'll dive into that in just a moment, but first I'm so excited to share about my book, Your Authentic Awakening, A Guide to Everyday Spiritual Living, which is out now. I'm so excited about the beautiful feedback I'm hearing from readers. This book is designed to help you reach new heights of spiritual awakening with spiritual guidance, practical tools, and captivating personal stories, all working together to expand your consciousness and open your heart. Find out more information on karagoodwin.com, including how to get your own signed copy, or get it wherever you like to get your books. And now, enjoy this episode. Well, welcome, Neil. I'm so excited to have you on again. Thanks for coming back.
I'm so excited to be here with you too. Thank you for having me.
So it has been a little while since you were here. Last time you were here, it was the Meditation Conversation podcast. I've since rebranded after several years. So now it's the Soul Elevation podcast.
Nice.
But so I know you've gone through this when you were on last time, but in case this is the first time that, in case people haven't heard that episode yet, talk about a little bit of the background of what led you to creating the Portal to Ascension.
Yeah, so the background is that, like a lot of people, I would say in this world that's doing this work, I felt that there was something a little off in the world, and I always got to put a disclaimer when I say this because ultimately I got to a place where I realized everything is how it should be, But in the beginning, I was like, wait a second, something's not quite how it could be. Maybe it was a feeling that we weren't living to our full potential, but I don't really know. I was like really young. I was like before my teenage years. I just felt this energy, and I was raised in a Hindu family in London, England, and did everything I was told: rites and rituals, prayed to gods. I was singing at temples, and never really actually thought about what I was doing. Never really considered God as a part of it, and it was just like a cultural thing. And then when I moved to California when I was 12, and when I turned 17, that's really when there was the big shift in my life. When I graduated in 2000, when I was 17 years old from high school, and before that, I'd been celebrating Christmas. I'd watched movies on Moses, on Ben-Hur, on Jesus, and being raised a Hindu in a really Hindu family, I was curious as to why we were, open to all of these other cultures and traditions. And I was told by my mom that all these other faiths are real as well. So I was wondering, well, if we believe these faiths are real, why don't these faiths believe we're real?
Good question.
Like there's only one way for all these other guys, right? And so because of that thought, I started looking to see if there is a root of all religion. I wanted to find a root cause, a root system, because maybe we all came from somewhere. Because if the story of Adam and Eve, which is a whole other conversation of what that story really is, but if that had any truth to it, then there were less people on the planet. Maybe there was one religion. Maybe it all stemmed out. I immediately found out that there was a lot of similarities with Jesus Christ, Yeshua, and Krishna. And these two beings should have evolved separately from each other. What I was told in the 1 year I went to Catholic school back in England. because the monotheism and polytheism supposedly were independent and had nothing to do with each other. But now I'm seeing that there's these monotheistic deities. You can call Yeshua one of them, and ones from my own religion that seem to have the same story, same backstory. So, is there a root to this? Where did it all come from? How did we exchange information? And as I was searching, and it was 18, 19 years old, 2000, 2001, I found the Sumerian scriptures. I found a lot of ancient scriptures. I was going through a lot of them, and then eventually found the Sumerian tablets of creation. And in that is the source text for a lot of Old Testament information, and including other religions. And so what I found in there was two smoking guns, and I'll leave my backstory at this. The two smoking guns were, one, it was the whole we were created in God's image and God's likeness was right from that text, but it said we were created in the Elohim's likeness, and the Elohim is a plural, and it doesn't have a gender to it. It's androgynous, right? So the original text that just changes the whole patriarchal God, God being a man, and it changes God to multiple gods, and it even said star beings, and it said where they came from, what planet they came from. So that was one big one that I was like, wait a second. And then the second one was I found a story of a flood of this hybrid giant called Gilgamesh traveling the planet. And as he was traveling the planet, guess who he runs into? Noah.
Noah.
And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, wait a second. This hybrid giant's roaming the planet and meets Noah. Noah tells him about the flood. But why is Noah not the only person left on the planet? What?
Uh-huh.
I thought the story of Noah was him the only one, and this is the original text. So I realized the Old Testament took part of that text and didn't show the fact that there were other hominid species on the planet. There were non-Homo sapien species coexisting as sentient life on the planet at the time of Noah, and
Right,
these
and
beings were
they
hybridized.
omitted the giants. I mean,
Right.
that's like super fun and fascinating, and they took that part out. I
Yeah,
mean, come
exactly.
on.
Yeah, so those are the two things that just took me down the rabbit hole after that, and it's been
Wow.
a long journey since then.
Well, and you do explore all kinds of fascinating aspects of history, kind of hidden history, we could say.
Yeah.
Now, when you started talking about your background, you said, I want to preface this by saying I've since come to the understanding that everything is perfect as it is.
Yeah.
So let's unpack that a little bit, because
Mm.
as you explore these things, and it's like, why has this stuff been suppressed? How has that been detrimental to the advancement of humanity, to consciousness, to us realizing our full potential? And I would love for you to expand upon how you've come about to understanding that everything actually is the way it should be,
Yeah.
and those things all coexist
Yeah,
together.
exactly. Because there's the paradox of it all being
Hmm.
okay. And I would say that the first glimpse in everything being how it should be was fast forward 8 years from the last story I just gave you, the Noah story. Now it's 2008 or something like that. And I'm at an open mic, and there's someone on stage that became my friend later, and he's singing this song, My Name is Love. And I was in the back kind of like just like reflecting on things, and I had been in conspiracies for quite a while. Like I this took me down bloodlines, Illuminati, conspiracies, and I really just completely had the concept that we're screwed, that they control us and we have no power, right?
Hmm.
and and also all this information was very spiritually connected, right? These ancient texts, there's a whole story within that of how I rediscovered Hinduism and what it was really about. How basically Hinduism is like a quantum physics lesson. Really, it's like an acoustic version of quantum physics embedded in the text. And so as I was discovering all that, I knew it was spiritual, but I didn't feel a spiritual connection. And during that time, in that moment, really, I realized that the missing link in all my exploration was love, and that not only was it it love, but everything happened the way it was supposed to be through unconditional love, giving us the experiences that we needed, that we signed up for. To put it very simply, right? We've heard that one before. We all signed up for this. But ultimately, the way I look at it now is that we on Earth have achieved the greatest of heights of evolution and consciousness, right? And Earth was a gift to a lot of those individuals. And it seems maybe in some way that the universe gifts the most advanced with the more challenging situations. Just like, I'm not just just like if you got specific certifications, and the more certifications you have, now you're able to do these harder tasks. You know what I'm saying? That's like what Earth is. And we were given the gift. So after we went around the cosmos, experienced all we could, achieved a lot of knowingness, achieved a lot of connection, the question was, well, how can we go and experience something different? Right? When we know all this stuff, what's a recipe for success, for experience in this moment? Well, why don't we go down to the lowest of densities, right? And why don't we wipe our memories clean so we don't remember any of that stuff, put ourselves on this planet and see if we can still figure it out even though we don't have any memories of it, right? And again, these are all putting things lightly, right? So that's pretty much what happened as we came to Earth. And now the beauty in that is, with the cards stacked against us, are we able still to see, and we'll get into this, the light or consciousness? Are we able, is the spark of consciousness so much of what we are that even when we wipe the memories of it, it will still come back to us, right? And so we've been going through that process of that choice. Now, within that choice, there were cycles that we created, cycles of time. These cycles of time gave us the opportunity to remember. I don't know, full remembrance, sometimes full remembrance, sometimes not, and then abilities to forget. It's been an endless loop for quite some time. I don't know how long, but it's been going on where we evolve. Usually it's around 13,000 years in the last rendition, and then devolution for 13,000 years, remembering, forgetting, remembering, forgetting. And as we've been in that cycle over the last few 100,000 years, the cycle has been getting even further apart, right? Where our forgetfulness is getting more extreme, our remembering is getting even more powerful. And this cycle has been designed by us, by our star family, who also are us in many ways, for us to gain certain experiences and clock them in. And not only that, also as an experiment in consciousness, right? Because it's not only us that is doing it. Think of how many species there are on planet Earth, right? There's many, many, many species on Earth. Many planets, many civilizations, they don't have as many species as us. Some of them only have a couple of species, right? So Earth is also a place where many different galactic beings, if not all of them, have donated DNA to the earthly experience to also go for this ride. So it's a multifaceted experience that gives us the opportunity to have these, highs and lows, but also gives us an opportunity to figure out how to live in harmony with all these other species that are connected genetically to all species in the galaxy. And as we're working out how to live in harmony with all of them, the DNA and the genetics connects to the galactic story of all the drama, karma, and trauma, which is what I like to call it, that we've created throughout the galaxy. So one of the other layers of Earth and what we're doing here is also, just through our experience of Earth, bringing peace and harmony throughout the galaxy.
I love that. And if we kind of take what you talked about in terms of you mentioned kind of a disempowering quality to the uncovering when you were going through the uncovering of what's under the surface of reality. You mentioned the Illuminati. It makes me think, I'm reading this book right now called Transylvanian Sunrise. Have you read this?
Mm-mm.
It's an old, it's been around for at least a decade, but it uncovers a lot of this, and it takes place in Romania. But I'm going back and forth with a lot of like, oh my gosh, it's verifying some of the things that you have touched on, not directly, but the overarching kind of thing.
Hmm.
But I have to hold on to my power, because it does feel so much like the deck is stacked against us. And so that is one of the things to be mindful of, is just that empowerment piece.
Yeah.
So let's talk about as we go deeper into, and this could relate to the collective, like what you've talked about in terms of the powers that be that kind of hold so much power. And it feels like, how could we ever be liberated when there's so much against us?
Hmm.
Or it could be individual. It could be that we have all of this trauma stacked into our lives. We're tapped into so much of the things that we're guilty, shameful, that we're, still processing things that have been done to us. So all of those that we could call shadows that we have at an individual level, all of that can make it feel like it's really difficult to then really be the fullness of who we are. So how can we use the darker parts of
Yeah.
human existence to come into ourselves?
Well, it's interesting because all those, as you said, all of those can make us feel that we're not as who we really are. But the interesting thing, again, another paradox is, without having that, we're not fully ourselves, because there is there is a shadow side to all creation, and shadow does not represent evil always. Let's get to neutral shadow and neutral light. The sun, is it a good guy or a bad guy, or does it just exist? It's the light, right? It does a lot of good, but if you were close to it, it could burn you into nothingness. A black hole, well, represents the darkness. It does. Is it a good or a bad? Well, from afar we can observe it and enjoy it, but then when you're next to it, it'll just pull you to shreds, right? And but those are representations of light and dark, and they're also representation of masculine and feminine, because the sun spews out, just like semen, it spews out energy, right? The black hole, just like a yoni, it takes in light. It's the masculine and feminine counterparts. Well, so then the feminine, we have given the archetype of darkness, but it's not the evil darkness. It's the kalima. It's the wormhole. It's that kind of energy, right? So this is how light and dark originally fragmented. Not until we became denser and denser and denser did the shadow part of creation become what we now know as good and evil, right? And when we transcend and ascend and go into other dimensions, we are going to get to a reality where light and dark will still exist, but the polarity is different than the duality. Duality and polarity have merged within this reality. So let's take a step back to the original inception of this. So first, when we exist, when before time and space, right, and all the ancient stories speak about there being a frequency, a word, the word. I used to think that maybe God or the original source was light, right? And a lot of like maybe religions talk about God in that kind of way, but that's a whole other story, because I feel that those aren't actually the source God. But if you get to the ancient origin stories that talk about what God originally was, almost always you hear some sort of sound, representation of sound. So the sound, the singularity, or before the Big Bang, the singularity or the oneness, it split. What did it split into? It split into duality. When it split into duality, one part of it went really, really fast, sped up. The frequency sped up. And what did it become? It became light, because light is at the higher, is a higher, not a higher frequency as in spiritual frequency, but a rapidness of frequency than sound. And then the other part of it slowed down. What did the slowed down part eventually become? The darkness. The So the singularity became the duality, where light and darkness eventually emerged. And my question to the world is, when the singularity split into duality and it eventually became light and dark, did it love one part of itself more than the other? Did the singularity or God, that's the Godhead, split to become darkness and light and said, okay, light, I only like you, darkness, I hate you, cast you out, you're Lucifer, let's figure out how to destroy you? Or did it accept both of itself unconditionally? And if anything, maybe it would even like and be more intrigued by the darkness, because the darkness was more of the polar opposite of what it originally was. Because the light still embedded harmony within it. The darkness embedded chaos. And through chaos came what's the term? Through chaos, I forget the term, but basically from chaos becomes order, right? The and this whole world has come from random atoms and all these things that seem so random, but has created this beautiful world that we've now created order of, right? So that's the original concept of what happened. Now, in that reality, there was only one dimension that had been created of this experience. And eventually, the light and dark coalesced into becoming planetary bodies, becoming people, becoming extraterrestrial races, interdimensional beings. And now here is how agendas and intentions manifested. So just to kind of summarize what I said, the reason why singularity split into duality became this was for one reason, which is to experience itself infinitely, something other. But as it split itself to experience something other, it allowed its creation to have free will. And when its creation started becoming physicality and beings, the free will of these beings were able to inflict their own agenda on creation. And now we have the cosmic play. Now we have the beginning of the ideas of good and bad, and then beings saying that you must be like this. This is the only way to be, right? Light beings that we've manifested as gods that were just a fragmentation of the original source that was allowed to inflict its own free will onto us, and they happen to choose to want to give us light, right? I don't know if this makes sense, but I'll hand it back to you, but there's a continuation story of the Garden of Eden story with God and Lucifer that really represents this archetype as well.
Oh, well, yeah, let's go into that. And then I also want to take it into the individual level because I love
Yeah.
that on the evolutionary level, on the bigger mass level. And it addresses what we talked about in terms of like the agendas, right?
Yeah.
That we're all kind of playing into here, willingly or otherwise, for many people otherwise. But then we've got the personal journey too. But let's talk about the Garden of Eden. Of
Yeah,
Eden.
this is a good segue too into that. So the concept of the Garden of Eden is that we have a God that has created this paradise and wants Adam and Eve to stay in it. And now the snake comes down, and the serpent basically doesn't really manipulate Eve, but tells Eve what God is doing and says, "Hey, God basically doesn't want you to have the opportunity to know yourself. But if you eat from this tree of knowledge, you will know, and you will have basically the snake gifted humanity free will. God wanted to create a fifth dimensional paradise for Adam and Eve and didn't want them to leave to experience anything other than that beautiful utopian reality. The snake gave us the opportunity to experience free will. However, when we left the Garden of Eden, we had our memories wiped clean. And then when we had our memories wiped clean and when this world is struggling, we thought, a lot of people thought it was original sin, that we must have sinned. We must have been kicked out of the garden. The story of the Garden of Eden is actually a story of the Lyrans and the Syrians. The Lyrans and the Syrians were geneticists, one of the earliest geneticists of Earth. And the Palladians helped them out too, but it was really a Lyran Syrian bond. And basically, there had been a lot of wars in Lyra, and the Lyrans eventually came down to Earth. There were other beings that had been here before and had left. And they came with the Syrians, and they decided to do a genetic experiment on the modern creation on Earth with their own DNA. And what their goal was they were going to create a lower dimensional than them being, and they were going to incarnate into these beings in order to live a simultaneous incarnation in a utopian Earth. So the beings that they were creating were going to have their own souls in it, the Lyran souls. So as they were doing this with the Syrians said, "Hey, you know what? Like, I don't think you guys can do this because even though you're creating these beings and they're going to have your souls, you're creating them in a free will universe. You cannot, you cannot tell these beings, even though they're your own souls, you can't tell them that this is how they have to live, even though it's a great. You need to give them a choice." So the Syrians and the Lyrans both had direct connections to the original source, and they could get information from source. They could remember source. So the Syrians went into some sort of state where they could communicate directly with source and told source what was happening, basically reporting and saying, "Hey, the Lyrans are violating the free will of these beings." And then source said, basically shrugged his shoulders and said, "Everything will happen as it should happen." Because the source intent is to experience. There is no real wrong experience for source. And so the Syrians came down and they took matters in their own hands. They offered the tribes, these are tribes of beings. Adam and Eve are representing tribes and not two people. They offered them the ability to know free will. And that was the story of it. So what this also represents is the snake represented the shadow of God. Okay, the shadow of the Garden of Eden, the shadow of humanity. It was basically this reptilian type of frequency that that exposed the shadow part, whereas you can consider God basically a new ager that only believes light exists and doesn't want to see the darkness of reality. But the Syrians weren't representing darkness. They represented more of a balance between the two and knew where the growth is there. So giving the humanity the opportunity to lower themselves into to a dimension to have this full experience. Now, as we came down to Earth, the shadow part of ourselves came as well. And what's been going on for so long is there's been so many challenges, so many traumas, and the shadow has grown. And in many ways, a lot of us have pushed away the shadow part of ourselves, especially in today's modern world. Jumping, fast forwarding thousands of years now to today's time, we've gotten to a world now where um, we have to be productive. We need to show up. We need to have a roof over our head. We have to. There's a lot of struggling going on. So many people, they don't have the opportunity to integrate parts of the shadow that they've collected through this life and others, because it could deter them from being able to just be a regular person that's a productive member of society, right? And what's happening now is that the only way that we can really shift into this higher octave of existence is by integrating fully. The Earth experience to me is is another experiment of, can we live in duality while we walk in singularity, right? Because duality will still exist. The singularity split into duality, and that's all the way into the highest of dimensions. Duality exists, but are we able to embody the oneness? And how do we embody the oneness? Well, we integrate the dark side of ourselves, the darkness of ourselves. And darkness of ourselves a lot of times isn't, as I said, evil or bad. Many times it's our own self-talk that tells us we're not worthy, we're not good enough. It's things that we've accepted and imposed on ourselves that make us feel lesser than who we are, right? And then of course, then there's other parts of like why you act out, why you somebody might be manipulative, somebody might lie a lot, right? All these different things. And when you get to the root of where they all come from, it comes from an innocent child most of the time that got hurt or traumatized. So a lot of times when I've done my own shadow work, I've been afraid to sit with myself. What am I going to see, right? Especially when I've done plant medicine experiences. It's like, oh, like I'm really afraid, like I'm going to see how I'm not a good of a person. But ultimately what I end up seeing is like an innocent child that got hurt, and you more times than not, you end up having compassion and empathy for yourself. And for having compassion and empathy for yourself, but not feeling sorry for yourself, having compassion and empathy for yourself, you eventually get to a place where you can nurture yourself and reparent yourself so that you can integrate yourself. You can integrate with your own shadow.
Yes, and that's the work. I think thank you for taking us through all of that. And there is so much in there. There's so much for us as individuals to reconcile within ourselves, and without being willing to integrate that shadow, we're missing an opportunity to be in that wholeness,
Yeah.
because just like you talked about collectively, that split, or that full expression of oneness where it went, very high vibrational and very low vibrational, and that was light and dark. But we have this within ourselves too, and I completely echo what you're saying. When we come across our own shadows, it's really hard. I know that my knee jerk as things have risen, because a lot of times for me, it's either a memory comes out of nowhere that I have suppressed so effectively that I haven't looked at it for decades. And then I'm like, how did I forget about this? But the instinct is, don't look at it. There's a part of me going, don't look at it. Nothing good's going to come out of that. You're going to get hurt again. And it's the willingness and the courage to be able to say, okay, well, what is there? And this is showing up right now. So it's time. It's time for me to look at this. Maybe I have the tools now to see this in a different way and to kind of alchemize what is showing up so that we can integrate it into ourselves. There were a few times, I love that you talked about the Syrians and the Lyrans. I'm having Debbie Solaris on later today, and
Oh,
she's
nice.
like a
Yeah.
Galactic, Akashic Records.
Historian.
What's that?
She's a historian for the
Historian.
Galactic too.
Yes. So this is such a great, like just in my own little world, such a great
Yeah.
primer for what's about to come to. Because I just, in researching for her work, I've also come across a lot of the Syrian Lyran
Yeah.
stuff. There's also, when you talk about the snake and you relate that to the reptilian energy, there's an ET component that I do want to come back to.
Yeah.
But also, do you have anything you want to say about like the Kundalini energy with the Garden of Eden and the snake? Does anything come up there?
Yeah, well, the snake definitely does represent the Kundalini, but that gets into archetypal and Orion connections of the actual
Oh,
reptilian of what it represents. Which Debbie
oh,
just did a presentation in Conscious Life Expo on Orion Wars. She's doing one on PortalToAscension soon on that, and we just did a conference 2 weeks ago on the Orion constellation, all on Orion, and so that's a huge connection there. Um, it's more of the integration of the reptilian energy within us, which also represents, awakening and enlightenment. But when you see the snake, not only in biblical texts, but all around the world, most of the time it is a representation of wisdom, spiritual enlightenment, and even advanced science. So in the Sumerian text, you see snakes represented in ways that talk about transportation. So transportation for these beings, how they transported themselves to Earth. So in my uh, theory, is the snake also represents a wormhole.
oh.
Yeah, because you see some really beautiful scriptures with snakes and then humans on the other side of it, and it kind of looks like it's talking about these beings coming through a portal to Earth, and whatever they did genetically changed the modern man on Earth.
Okay, I don't know if I've heard that before, but that gives me chills. I love it. And it makes me think too of like Mayan structures. Like I went to the Yucatan Peninsula last
Hmm.
year, and I know you did the Galactic Cruise. You organized that, right? The
Yeah,
Galactic Cruise in the autumn or in the winter, and went to some of the Mayan temples as well. But there were all these snakes depicted on
yep,
these ancient temples, ancient pyramids as well. And I was kind of like, oh, I wonder if that's like the Kundalini energy or what that is. But that makes so much sense.
yeah. Oh my God, snake represents so much. It's like, where do you even start? But the snake energy, the reptilian energy, let's say, represents the shadow part of Earth, and also has a polar opposite, represents the awakening of Earth. But when it comes to the fact that if you showed a snake right here in the room right now, okay, in your room, to you or to 100% of the planet, all of a sudden there's a snake in front of them, chances are 90 to 99% of them are going to freak out, right? There, even if I like snakes, I like snakes. I'm into reptilian energy, but I would still freak out from a snake. There's some sort of thing ingrained in our mind that that specific animal or that specific reptilian has something to us, does irk something to us. There's a collective trauma that we experience from a serpent energy. There are many reptilians in the universe. The reptilian template was here before human template was. The dragons were the ancestors to all the reptilians. And when we got here, just like how there are good and bad humans, there were all types of reptilians as well, and there still are. Only around 5% of them can you even consider nefarious. Only around 5%. The rest of them are, some of them are supporting us, some are our ancestors, but a lot of them are just doing their own thing because they have no reason to interfere with us. They're living in harmony wherever they're living, right? But the ones that specifically affected us created such a disturbance in the force, if you will, that it took us to a point of having a collective trauma over reptilian energy. Different species as well, because some civilizations didn't have that. A lot of individual ET races have interacted with different ethnic groups on Earth, right? So this collective trauma has manifested in this world. Now, to take a step back on the original story, it they're one of the original stories because the Anunnaki also had a reptilian connection to them. But one of the main stories of the manipulation of the reptilian energy on Earth that created the shadow connects to everything we just spoke about, including the cycles of time. And this goes back into Orion in the central star of Anilim, and which is a star I had 101 lives on in a planet rotating around it.
That you
The
did?
Yeah, that I did. I have a whole presentation just on like a 2 hour presentation on my lives in that planet.
Did
So I'll
you
give
get
you
that
a
through
summary.
like QHHT
Yeah,
or?
exactly. Uh huh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and more memories have been coming since then.
Was that one
So
of the outer ones or in the belt
it's in the
of
belt.
Orion? In the
It's in the
belt?
belt.
Hmm.
The central star in the belt.
Okay.
Al
So you have
Nilam.
a really strong connection with that one. I mean,
Oh yeah,
101,
yeah,
that's a lot
yeah.
of lives.
Hey, it's so strong. I just did a 22-hour 2 day event on it.
22 hours?
11 hours
Mamma
a
mia.
day for that's how my some of my conferences are 11 hours a day.
Wow.
Yeah, I just did 2 weeks ago. We just did 20 to 22 hours of Orion information.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have that connection to the dragons. I had a QHHT session 3 years ago on, and then I had three other sessions, and Orion stuff came up. I saw myself as a reptilian in three different reptilian races. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us more about that.
Okay. So long story short.
Yeah,
Okay.
not 22 hours worth.
I wasn't the only one speaking, but
Yeah, I know.
this is a long journey. Like, so basically, this there's stargates throughout the galaxy, probably all throughout the universe, and these stargates allow you to go to other planets, and then some of them are specifically designed to allow you to go to other dimensions, and some of them are also designed to allow you to go into lower dimensions as well. Right, so it'll kind of like dematerialize you, and then you'll be born on another planet. Right, it's like what people think heaven is, like, oh, a soul comes from heaven and comes to a womb. It's also almost like a planet that you're living on, and then a portal you can go through and then come into a womb. Right,
Mm.
and so the largest stargate in the galaxy is on this planet rotating around the central star in Orion. It's the stargate of all stargates, really. And it it's called, well, it has a nickname, and the nickname is, and this is a whole other story here, but the nickname is Portal to Descension. Okay, and
That's very
and
appropriate for
yeah,
you in
yeah.
particular.
Well, that's why I was the Stargate keeper. So you know the movie Thor, when there's that guy at the Rainbow Light Bridge in Thor, and he's holding the trident, and he knows the codes to put you through the Stargate to go through. It's exactly like that. I was that guy. I was the portal keeper. And the portal keeper is someone that knows the technology, knows how to repair it, knows how to what codes take you to what realities, has a collective memory of all the codes. So basically, the guy that knows how to run the machine. Okay, and so in the beginning, I was actually, before this even came about, I was actually one of the races that came from outside of Orion that created the Stargate on that planet. I was one of the technicians. Then I transitioned from that life, and all my life started on Orion. I started being born on Orion as with full of memories in order to keep up this Stargate. So I was doing that for generations and generations, and then the Orion Wars broke out. And the Orion Wars was an infiltration, and now there's two different stories here. One is it was a reptilian infiltration, and another one is it was a non-personified energy that hijacked the bodies of reptilians on a planet in Orion and then utilize their bodies to inflict their intentions, right? Which is what my friend Lorianette, who's like the big Orion ambassador, says. So I'm not sure if it was direct reptilian energy or if this is the story, but basically, these beings that look like they're reptilians started this war. And the backstory to that, right, is that you can't even blame the starters, whoever started the war, because there was actually an original wound that happened millennia before that created a conflict between reptilian and human beings. That was because humans were utilizing reptilian DNA without asking for their approval. They were
Mm.
violating their own free will of their DNA. That was the original wound. Ages later, these beings are in a war with humans on in Orion. Now the war's about to end, and my planet has been devastated by war, right? And so the reptilians, they're about to lose the war, and since they're gonna lose it, they knew this is what their consequence was gonna be. Energy in the universe always exists. Your energy, I'm energy. We will always exist, but your personality can be neutralized. Your experiences, your identity, who you are can be neutralized, and you can just become a part of the energy source of it all. So their consequence was some sort of ceremony to basically neutralize their personalities and just rejoin the collective energy of the nebula of M42 in Orion.
And sorry, are we still talking about the reptilians?
Yeah, that was the
Okay,
consequence for them for what they have
for the
done in
war.
Orion. Yeah.
Okay.
So what they did was they invaded my planet. This planet had a crater god technology in it, orb that was buried deep into the earth that terraforms planets. You get this orb, you put it into a planet that's desolate. Within hours, rivers, mountains, lakes terraforms. It
Wow.
was it's called the cosmic egg, and it came from M42, which is also the cosmic egg. It was birthed from the mother nebula, and there's a few of them in the galaxy. So they came to this planet. They extracted the core from the planet. They went up to the Stargate where I was with a bunch of other people fighting. They overpowered us. They won that battle. They went through the Stargate. When they went through the Stargate, where did they go? To Earth.
Earth.
Yes.
Hmm.
So we saw the code on the Stargate was Earth, but we couldn't witness them there. They weren't there. We couldn't figure out where they went. The code said they went to Earth, but they're not there. We could even see millions of years of Earth history all in one moment because of the way Orion works. But we couldn't, we saw their manipulation of DNA everywhere, but we couldn't see them anywhere. So what happened was they took this technology, the creator god technology, and the technology allowed them to stop in between dimensional incarnations. They stopped themselves in between time, able to observe 100 million years of Earth time at the same moment, and became a 100 million year puppet master of Earth. They were etherically affecting Earth's DNA and manipulation from 100 million years from before today up until this moment. Who was around 100 million years ago? The dinosaurs. One of the first things that they manipulated were the raptors, the raptor DNA. They actually look like raptors. The raptors in them look the same,
Those
right?
are the giant flying ones. Is that
No, no,
right?
the raptors. No, no,
No,
no,
that's
no.
a pterodactyl.
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
they
the
like
raptors.
the?
Have you seen Jurassic Park in the
I
not the latest
have.
one, but the one before that?
Oh, I think
That
so.
basically one of the dinosaurs becomes really like intelligent.
Oh, I don't remember.
All right, it's the two-legged ones.
Okay,
Okay,
two-legged, and
two-legged.
it's like
The
medium
rump.
size, long tail, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay.
And so this is what they look like, and they basically altered that DNA. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to incarnate on Earth, and their reason was to escape prosecution and escape what the consequence was. But they knew Earth had this veil of amnesia, and Earth's consciousness was at such a low level that if they incarnated, they would wipe their memories clean, and they would also be susceptible to the environment of Earth. Right. So what they were doing was they were manipulating DNA slowly but surely over a 100 million year plan in order to shift Earth's consciousness to get it to a point that sentient life could start incarnating, and they could incarnate without forgetting the memories. Right. So on one level, they did something bad. On another level, they're the reason why Earth's consciousness got to a level that it could harbor the life that we have now. Right.
Mm.
And on one level, before they came to Earth, the cycles of time were what I said in my presentation is basically the cycles of time was a Ferris wheel, right? You'd go up a little bit, you go down a little bit. When they came down to Earth, and what they did is they made it a roller coaster. They made the dip so low, which only allowed for the polar opposite to now exist, the highest of highs, creating the school of Earth being the one of the best schools in the galaxy right now for souls to come through to be able to achieve the greatest of heights, right?
Hmm.
So even though they came and they did all this, they began implementing a plan to protect themselves from a fear of what was going to happen to them. But the consequence of what they did was actually something that ended up becoming positive and allowing for this. And as they were genetically altering our DNA, they started also contributing towards parts of our own physical body. Our amygdala was a donation directly from them, and the reptilian brain is actually also from them too. The reptilian brain grew before our cortex and other parts of our brain grew. And what are those two parts good for? Okay, the amygdala, it regulates our fear, right? The reptilian brain, it regulates our survival. What were the two traumas that they brought within them? A fear and having to survive. So, what they contributed to our experience on Earth is our ability to survive and our fear. And you could probably agree that fear isn't always a bad thing. It's actually a warning sign for us to know that lion is going to eat us. You know what I mean? So, anyways, that there's so much more. I don't want to keep going on because I've said enough, but that's some of the story.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And you touched a little bit on dragons to
Yeah.
start with, and I would love if you could just give us a little bit of your insight on dragons because I feel like they are classified as reptilians, but I think it depends on your perspective, just like everything. It depends on your perspective. Are they good? Are they bad? Can you give us, and I know it's much more complicated as you've illustrated through this whole talk, it's never just one or the other. But talk a little bit about what dragons are and their history, their purpose.
Yeah. So yeah, the dragons are the original ancestors of all reptilians. I don't think there are any bad dragons. And most of them have actually now aren't physical anymore. Most of them have ascended to other dimensions where they're representing guides and assisting us. So this one tribe that I connected with was is called the Red Dragon tribe, and the dragons have assisted in many different levels. But these ones, basically, they help with the birthing process. So there is well, firstly, souls don't come from outside of space. They don't come from heaven. They don't come from outside of Earth. They come from the subatomic particles within. We're all made of subatomic particles. The subatomic particles all have a singularity. So, in essence, you could kind of say that we're made out of infinite black holes and wormholes. And through that, kind of like a holographic projection, you're having light frequency vibrate in and out. And that light frequency that vibrates in and out is a representation of your physical body that our limitation of our bandwidth frequency sees and feels as physical, but is ultimately just a light emanation coming out of infinite singularities, holographic projection, right? So nothing comes from outside, everything comes from within the wormhole. The illusion is that it comes from outside. And so now the earth as well, souls quite literally get birthed from a subatomic particle within the core of earth. In the core of earth is subatomic energies as well. Everything has subatomic energy because we're all made out of atoms. Atoms are made of subatomic particles. And there is this place inside the earth that looks like a translucent blue pool. And it's kind of like the outside, the exit of the wormhole. This is where souls come from. The souls get birthed from this. Around this translucent blue pool are the red dragon tribe, the apparitions, because they're all spirits. When a baby comes through, the dragon will take the baby, caress the baby, and they will go and implant it into a womb. Kind of like the stalks, the birds, the stalks,
storks? Yeah.
the storks. Yeah, there we go. That would go and do that. They're kind of like that. And now, what is the womb? The womb is a wormhole for life. And this is, I don't mean this metaphorically at all. If the case in point on that is that if you have 4 or 5 children and you believe the soul exists, is every soul of that child already inside of you? Like, say that this person has 5 kids. So does that mean that they have 6 souls in them now? And does it mean if they choose not to have 2 more souls, they got 2 more babies, they got 2 extra souls inside of them? Or does that soul come upon inception from somewhere? And it does come from inception. And I've seen the fertilization of an egg with sperm through a microscope. And there's this light spark that happens in that moment. And I feel like the soul enters. And basically, the dragon spirit represents an ability, a technology to utilize the wormhole within the womb to implant that fertilization with an actual baby. And so they assist in that process. And now they stay around with you for the first 3 years of your life. They act as your imaginary friend. They do, sometimes you see them as dragons. This one person, when I was in Germany last year, some random doctor asked me and my friend, what do we do? And, I try to keep it as light as possible, but I was like, oh, she represents the angelic realm. And then this person super mainstream says, well, it's interesting. All I said was she represents the angelic realm. I do events on consciousness. And she goes, well, it's very interesting. My daughter had an imaginary red dragon friend for the first 3 years of her life. Wow. And I was like, this person is not into spiritual world. I didn't even mention dragons. My regression was only 3 months before that. Right. Wow. And so a lot of people see dragons. A lot of times they act like different beings. And what these beings represent are actually the buffer zone for the trauma of coming to Earth. They are your counterpart. You knew them in the dragon realms. They're your connection to the ancestry of the reptilian energy that goes beyond this, because many of us on Earth are or have had reptilian lives. And then when you hit 3 years old and your memories start solidifying, they curl up into your heart. And and then you go lifetime after lifetime with the intention and the goal to activate your dragon heart, right? And right now we're going through a collective activation of the dragon. So last year was the year of the dragon. And the regression I had was a few months before that. I had no idea the year of the dragon was coming up. I never even considered Chinese zodiacs up until then. And what I got was that the dragons have been assisting us unconditionally, off the grid, off the radar for quite some time. But now is time coming for a really pivotal moment in humanity that they're showing up in real form now. They're coming to the forefront. They have been, a lot of reptilians, including the dragons, have been so supportive of us. But when you get to a point where you transcend your own ego, you don't need to have credit for what you're doing, right? So there's beings out there that we might even collectively judge on Earth that don't care because they're supporting us unconditionally, including not just the dragons, but different reptilians as well.
Wow. Well, it's fascinating that you bring up that last year was the year of the dragon. This is the year of the snake. So we're right on point accidentally with our conversation.
Exactly. So let's get into now the shadow work part, and
Yeah.
so the course that I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Well, we already spoke about why, but the shadow workers course is a representation of riding the wave of the energies of these last 2 years. So it's amazing. We have two reptilian years combined, and yes, the reptilian energy represents so much more, but for Earth and what's going on right now is a collective reconciliation of the shadow, and it's happening individually and collectively. For example, the dragon year, it was the masculine wood dragon, okay? And it was the dragon represents fire, fierceness, right? No bullshit kind of thing, just like let it all go out there. And so what happens during that year is things come to the surface, and it's like you have no choice but to deal with it. Deal with it. It might be a little chaotic for you. It might be a little existential crisis. It might be like, who really am I? What really is this? But deal with it. So for us individually, but also collectively, things like the Epstein files, things like P. Diddy, things like the corruption that's going on in the world, and atrocities and the real agendas behind things, right? And and even celebrity stardom crumbling. Okay, and that's a whole, obviously, another conversation as well. Is celebrity stardom and hierarchy is crumbling because we're ending the age of hierarchy. We need to realize that we are great beings individually, and the only way for us to really do that is by to crumble the structures that we've considered to be better than us, right? Part of the shadow work. Now we get into this year. This year is the feminine snake. Okay, great. Now we can do the shadow work with a little more ease and harmony. It doesn't have to be so forceful and fierce. And what does the snake do? The snake, it sheds its skin. And does it shed its skin with, is it hard? Does it go through challenges? Is it in pain? No, it sheds its skin effortlessly. And ultimately, there might be a little bit of nervousness as the shit is being shed, as the skin is being shed, because you're afraid of what you're going to see underneath. But once you shed your skin, what do you realize? You were beautiful and intact all along, right? And I feel that's the most perfect archetyped metaphor to really represent what's happening now. Is the shadow work continues, but when the shadow work happens, we can do it with ease and grace. We can realize that deep down underneath all of it, we were beautiful all along. So what I want to do this year is, I've had some astrology readings and some other divinely orchestrated moments that made me realize that I'm taking a lot of shifts with Portal to Ascension and what I want to bring into the world. And I feel like what I want to bring now for myself, and then as a reflection through Portal to Ascension, is some really deep transformational experiences. And part of that is radical vulnerability and honesty with ourselves and others, including things like avoiding distractions that help us, or moving away from distractions that help us avoid seeing things within ourselves, right? Because we have so much of that, whether it's the media, whether it's your phone, whether it's some other vice, right? We have so many things that allow us just to not look deep within of what's happening with ourselves. So I'm curating events this year that give us the opportunity to do that. And that shadow workers course we're going to do over 3 months, I'm going to be along the ride with everybody. We're going to be doing some deep work, and it's really about people who um, want to. And I'll just end this part with this: if there is one of the eventual goals in here is, how could you reconcile with some of the deepest atrocities in the world, right? That have happened, and a lot of things that we've seen right now, and be at peace with yourself and that other person, and see the wounded aspect of that person, but still be sovereign enough to hold that energy accountable from a non-reactory place, right? Because what's what happens? We get triggered. Oh my God, he did all this stuff. Like, look what P. Diddy did. Look what Epstein did. This is what we need to do. I can't believe it. Oh my God, this is what the world's like. That's the reaction. How can you see what the original wound was of creation up until that moment, what their wounds were, and see that in a light of how do we rehabilitate the darkness? The darkness, and one more analogy here. When I was in Vipassana a few months ago, I was the whole shadow workers course came to me after day 6. I've been meditating for many hours a day, and what I saw was an apparition that a lot of times people have said to me that the light is so strong that when you switch on the light, the darkness runs from it. And what I saw was that same moment in my mind's eye. I saw somebody come into a room of darkness, switch on the light, and then instead of what that was, I saw a little child, shadow child, no facial expression, nothing, it's black, in the corner of the room, quivering in fear. That is a more actual representation of what darkness is than, oh my God, I don't like to let him out. It's a wounded part of creation that has been fragmented and fractalized so far from the original source that it doesn't even recognize itself in the light anymore. Right? So, which is why do people say sending you back to the light, sending you back to the light? Because they're trying to have the darkness remember itself in that. Right?
Absolutely.
And on the polar opposite, the light's the same way. The light doesn't even see itself in the darkness in many ways, which is why it's not about being a light worker. It's not about being a shadow worker. I'm only doing a shadow worker's course to bring harmony between the two. If there's anything, I would say, and we started this thing out with it, we're frequency workers. It's neutral, really, right? We give the polarity to it.
That's beautiful. So when are you having this course?
It starts August 16th.
Okay. And how can people find out more about the course and more about your work in general?
Sure. So the course, if you go to PortalToAscension.org, upcoming events, and then you scroll down there, just like the 4th or 5th one is the Shadow Workers course. You can also go to all of our upcoming events, check it out there. It's also listed there. And if you're interested in anything that we're doing at Portal to Ascension, we have some amazing events coming up this year, 26 and 27. 26, 25, which is now I'm taking a break of live events. But in 2026, we have like 3 live conferences. We're doing a Mediterranean Greek island cruise and Turkey cruise, which is going to be great. And then 27, that's the year of contact, in my opinion. That's going to be a huge year for us realizing we're not alone collectively on the planet. So we're building up energy for that. So if you want to be a part of what we're doing, PortalToAscension.org, you can sign up there in the newsletter. And then also our YouTube channel, youtube.com/PortalToAscension.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Neil. This has been such a wonderful, informative, and deep discussion. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you too. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Soul Elevation. Please take a moment to think about someone in your life who might be uplifted or have their curiosity sparked by this content, and send it on to them. Let's keep sharing high-frequency, empowering content to reinforce the highest potential for humanity. I also invite you to subscribe to this content. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to the next episode of Soul Elevation.